Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today's video is an opinion piece. It's part 2 of a 3-part kind of series I'm doing, and is Manny Pacquiao the greatest of all time? Is what it's pretty much called. And the reason for this video, as I explained in the Mayweather video, was I'm on this Boxing Fanatics page, Imi Khan. Big shout out to you, man. Got hundreds of thousands of followers on there, and it's constantly bashing back and forth, asking if Mayweather's the greatest of all time, and Pacquiao. A lot of just pro Mayweather and pro Pacquiao, and haters on both sides. And my job is to, since I have my own boxing channel, and I'm a critic, and everything. But I like to think of myself as being very fair and down the middle about all my opinions, even if I don't like a fighter. Like, I don't like Mayweather, but I have a very honest opinion that is based on a lot of facts. That's what my opinion is, based on a lot of facts. And a lot of people don't know the whole story behind Pacquiao Mayweather. They don't know the whole story behind their own fighters. And I noticed this in other sports that I'm big on, like football. A lot of guys don't know their own damn team, but they'll wear their jersey, and to me that's fine, but you are a casual. That's all you are. You are not a hardcore fan. So you shouldn't make blanket statements unless you know all the facts. I like to think I know most of the facts of everything that I cover, and that's what I'm doing here. This is to discuss the argument on the Pacquiao side, to defend Pacquiao, and also critique Pacquiao, and how good and how great he is as a fighter, which he's an all-time great. Let me put you there. He is top 10 all-time. He could be top 5. But the argument, which we will get to when I do the Mayweather versus Pacquiao video, that's the 3rd part. I'm going to discuss their rivalry, when they should have fought, why they didn't fight. I'm going to get into detail about that and why it's both of their faults, because a lot of people want to blame Pacquiao, a lot of people want to blame Mayweather. I'm going to get into the details of why it was both of them, why that fight didn't pop off when everybody wanted it to. But it's to settle the question of whether they're the greatest of all time, one, and the other question is, who's the greater fighter between the two, because that's constantly what we get, like in terms of their all-time legacy and everything. Even though they fought, it's still in question, and rightfully so, but there is an answer, and it should be clear-cut. And based on my facts, both sides should accept that answer, because it is clear-cut. So, first off, let's answer the question at the beginning here. Is Pacquiao the greatest of all time? And that answer is very clearly no. But as I put in the Mayweather video, neither is Mayweather. These guys are top 10 easy, both of them. Top 5, right in that area, I believe. I believe you can argue top 5 for both men. Their legacies and their what they've done for the sport, their impact is huge. But the greatest of all time is Muhammad Ali, as I said in the Mayweather video. Muhammad Ali, the impact he had on the sport, what he's done inside the ring, the greatness of all his fights, he can't be touched. There's certain sports figures in almost every sport that it's very hard to touch them. Going over the major sports, for me, Michael Jordan in basketball, Babe Ruth in baseball, and that's just based on what they've accomplished and everything, and the impact they made with what they accomplished also. And you got to go Tom Brady in football. You just have to. He's surpassed Jerry Rice. He's surpassed every other quarterback. I mean, I think it's pretty clear-cut. Tom Brady's the greatest football player of all time now. What he's done and what he's accomplished is just amazing. And I'm not just talking about championships. It's memories. It's the rivalries that you build up, and what people remember. That's impact right there. So Pacquiao and Mayweather have a great deal of both of those. But this video is on Manny Pacquiao. We're going to get into the pros and cons of his long, illustrious, and fantastic career. But Why do we like Manny Pacquiao? Well, we like Manny Pacquiao because just the force of nature, his style is really what sold Manny, but his hunger, his willingness to mix it up. What I loved about Manny Pacquiao was the way he developed as a fighter after he had already become great. With Freddie Roach, he had already become a great pound for pound type fighter, and then he topped that off basically by becoming a complete fighter. And when he became a complete fighter is really when he really jumped from superstar to all-time great and megastar during that 3-fight win streak that he had, that we'll get into, over De La Hoya, Hatton, and Miguel Cotto. But this guy he was just a force, and he still is, and his longevity, is amazing what he's done in the last 20 years of boxing. And the guy is purely an all-time great. He really is. His ability to do it over this course of time, win his first world title at 98 pounds, and I believe that was in the late 90s. And now in 2021, he's still competing for world titles at a high level in the best division in boxing. And part of the reason that's the best division in boxing is because Manny Pacquiao, even at 42, 43 years old, is still a very good to great fighter and can compete with the best fighters. And that's not an easy task. So, we're going to get into what he's done in his mega career. We're going to go over his victories and everything, and talk about what he's done that truly has made him great. And you start that off with, he had a couple losses early in his career as he was starting and coming out. A lot of people thought he was just going to be kind of that flash in the pan brawler. Freddie Roach got a hold of him, and they put him on HBO on short notice against a solid fighter, a world champion, and he destroyed that guy. And then he ended up getting the shot against Marco Antonio Barrera, who at the time was the number 1 featherweight in the world and was the world champion. And Pacquiao dominated Barrera. And to be honest with you, Pacquiao pissed me off because I was a huge fan of Barrera. I sided on the Barrera-Morales feud. It was all about Barrera to me. I was a big fan of him. He's humble. And, Pacquiao came out and absolutely kicked the shit out of Barrera. Barrera did not know what hit him. 11th round stoppage, and the star was born at that point. He got a crack with Juan Manuel Marquez, and thankfully that fight did not get stopped in the first round when Pacquiao scored 3 knockdowns, because if it did, I don't think we have the great rivalry of Pacquiao-Marquez, the 4 fights that we had. And to me, that might be the greatest rivalry of all time, next to maybe, Ali and Frazier. This was truly a great rivalry. It might be the greatest rivalry of all time that went over 3 fights, but we'll get into that as we go. But Pacquiao just became the killer. He went up to 130, and he signed on the showdown with Eric Morales, and he ended up losing the first fight in a close one. That was a close, good back and forth fight. Morales just seemed to beat him to the punch and have the formula that night, but it was very close. I had it 7-5. That was the first legit loss since he became a superstar. Then after that, he was pissed. He got the rematch with Morales, and he dominated Morales in the rematch, wore him down, stopped him in the 10th round, and, put everybody on notice. But then the third fight was signed. And to be honest, I thought Morales maybe was overlooking him the second fight. And heading into the third fight, I picked Morales to win. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I know making weight hurt Morales, but Pacquiao walked right through Eric Morales that night. So much so to where Eric Morales pretty much quit sitting on his ass after he got knocked down for the third time. He looked over at his dad, and he just shook his head while he was sitting on the ground. And that was all she wrote. To absolutely take the heart of that Mexican warrior, Morales, who was a great fighter, was huge. Then he had the fight with Juan Manuel Marquez, the rematch at 130. And because of a knockdown that he scored earlier in the fight, the fourth between, the two fights, he got a very close split decision victory in that one. Another great fight between the two that went back and forth. And, Pacquiao, though, another big win. Then he fought Marco Antonio Barrera again and dominated him over 12 rounds, but Barrera just didn't seem willing to engage too much with Pacquiao, and he just got outworked and beat. And Pacquiao decided to move up to 135 through all that, and he destroyed David Diaz, who was a solid, lightweight, absolutely face-planted him with a knockout. That was when Pacquiao was really the pound-for-pound number one fighter in the world. Most people were considering him that, and they really wanted to see what he would do next. And a huge mega fight was signed when he called out Oscar De La Hoya. And Freddie Roach helped call out Oscar in that fight. And the fight was signed for December of 2008. And De La Hoya was coming down to 147 for his first time in 4 or 5 years. And I knew going into that fight, I looked, first off, De La Hoya hadn't fought a southpaw, and I believe this is accurate, since he took on Pernell Whitaker in 1997. Southpaws always gave him trouble. He avoided a fight with Winky Wright because of that. But De La Hoya, there was that factor, and also the factor that De La Hoya was on weight a couple weeks before the fight. He was already at 147. And when he weighed in, he looked very sucked up. You could tell it was tough for him to make that weight. But even all that, most people, myself included, felt he was too big. And De La Hoya always being able to compete, taking on Pacquiao, who was moving up 2 weight classes after moving up all the way since 98 pounds. I just don't think many people thought that Pacquiao stood a chance. I certainly didn't. And Pacquiao absolutely destroyed Oscar De La Hoya. 1 second. I never saw Oscar in his whole career get beat on the way he did that night. Even a fight with Bernard Hopkins. It was a good fight, but Hopkins really didn't set up that knockout punch. He just landed a great punch on the liver of Oscar in the 9th round of a good fight and laid him out, and he was much bigger than him. But De La Hoya he could not get to Manny. Manny was just in and out, was just absolutely beating him down. And De La Hoya called it quits after the 8th round. He retired in his corner and retired from the sport, not being able to compete. And Manny, that was the start of a huge 3-fight run that didn't stop after those 3 fights, but I think this is really his 3 best victories all back to back. Because he took on Ricky Hatton next, and one punch laid out Hatton in the 2nd round. At the end of the 2nd round, Hatton's head bounced off the mat. Hatton was never the same after that loss. He'd already been knocked out against Floyd Mayweather, but definitely not as brutal, not even close. And that was highlight reel stuff. And then Pacquiao took on Miguel Cotto. Now I am going to knock Pacquiao because he made Cotto cut a couple pounds in this one. Now, I didn't understand that. Maybe it's because he was the A side, and during the De La Hoya fight, he was the B side, so the agreed upon weight was 147, but he forced Cotto to come down to 145 for that fight. I didn't like that. I really didn't, but I'm not sure it made a difference. Cotto had fought at 140 before. He had just spent the last few years at 147, and I just really felt like I don't like the having guys cut a couple pounds bullshit. I just don't like that stuff. I think it's weak. I think it you're trying to gain an advantage for why you're smaller or bigger, but if you've already competed in that weight without an issue, I don't like it. I really don't. I don't mind if you have a guy come down and meet you halfway because you've never competed that high. If the guy's willing to do it, that's on the guy. But I liken this to Canelo and Mayweather. I never understood why Mayweather had Canelo cut those extra 2 pounds and come down to 152. if he'd already competed at 154 when he fought De La Hoya, which he did. And I didn't understand Pacquiao making Cotto come down to 145 if he'd already competed at 147, which he did against De La Hoya. But all that being said, this was a fantastic performance for Pacquiao. He absolutely beat down Cotto. It was competitive until the third round when he landed that right hook that really hurt Cotto, put him down. But then in the fourth round when he landed the left and really shook him, and then Cotto just got on his horse the rest of the fight. Pacquiao stalked him, chased him, and just broke him down, finally stopping him in the 12th round. Fantastic performance. And that capped off that 3 fights of just destruction for Manny Pacquiao right there. But it didn't stop. Manny went all the way up to 154 and won a world title there, absolutely decimating Antonio Margarito. You know, but I want to say it was 2010 or 2011. I believe it was 11 when Pacquiao ran into Tim Bradley. And, you know, most people felt that Bradley could compete with Pacquiao. I certainly thought he would. And I was a big Bradley fan, but this ended up being the biggest robbery I've ever seen in my life in the sport of boxing, because I gave Pacquiao 10 to 11 rounds. I only gave Bradley 1 solid round in that whole fight. I thought Pacquiao absolutely dominated and kicked the shit out of Timothy Bradley. And I was shocked when 2 judges gave Bradley that fight by split decision. I could not believe it. It was terrible. The worst call I've ever seen. I have to say that. Absolutely terrible. And I was pulling for Bradley. But that loss didn't really seem to shake Pacquiao. But Bradley, his name grew big because he followed that up by beating Marquez. And that just kind of fueled the fire. But Pacquiao went on. I believe he beat Bradley in a rematch. And I'm not sure. I'm not clear on this 100%. This is why I think it was possibly 2010 or early 11. But I know at the end of 2012 is when Pacquiao decided to fight Juan Manuel Marquez. Well, no, they fought in 2011. I take that back. They fought in 2011. I believe it was October of 2011. They fought for the world title, and Pacquiao came up short in that fight. Actually, that was the fight that was the prelude to the Bradley loss. But Pacquiao went in against Marquez and beat him by a majority decision. I personally thought Pacquiao won that fight, but it was close. It was a good fight. You know, Marquez was doing well in the second half of the fight. His trainer, for some reason, told him he had the fight like after the 9th or 10th round. So Marquez didn't do as much, and it cost him on the scorecards. I thought Pacquiao won that fight convincingly, but not convincingly though. But of the 3 fights, I thought that was the most convincing that I thought Pacquiao had won. But that one pissed Pacquiao off, and he wanted the 4th fight at some point. Finally, in December of 2012, the 4th fight occurred. And it was a classic. Marquez knocked Pacquiao down for the first time in their 4 fights. And then Pacquiao came back and knocked Marquez down. Pacquiao looked like he had Marquez reeling. He had broken Marquez's nose, and he looked like he was going to lay him out heading into the 7th round. But right at the end of the 6th round, Pacquiao came in head first. Maybe the biggest mental mistake that he's always makes, that he's made in his career. Coming in head first, lunging in, and Marquez landed. Maybe you can argue one of the top 3 to 5 punches in boxing history. His right hand right down the pipe and face planted, knocked out Pacquiao cold. And Marquez put a lovely bow on their 4-fight rivalry with that victory. But you know, Pacquiao, being who he is, could have let that one affect him, you know, but he came back. And he ended up becoming the WBO champion again. He beat Bradley in their second and third fight convincingly, as he did the first fight. And, you know, left no doubt. He ran into Jeff Horn a few years back, though, and he dominated. This is one of the top 10 worst decisions for me, too, because he dominated Jeff Horn. He only stopped him in the 9th round. I even gave him a 10-8 round, even though he didn't put him down in that round, because he beat him down so badly and had him reeling. And how the judges again, but it was in Horn's country of Australia, so I guess people shouldn't be too shocked. But he lost that fight to Horn. Now, this was after the mega fight with Mayweather, which he lost in 2015. You know, I'll get into that fight in detail in my third video. I'm kind of skipping around because just pointing out the big major things that he's done. But he made a monster comeback the last couple of years, dominated Lucas Matisse, dominated Adrian Broner in January 2019, and then went in against Keith Thurman. And I thought he won 8 rounds of that fight. I didn't think it was close enough to call a split decision, but he got a split decision win over the undefeated Keith Thurman, and really let everybody know that he's still here to play, even at, I believe he was 41 at that time, or 40. And now he returned 2 years later and got convincingly outboxed against Yordenis Ugas. But he took the fight on 11 days notice. He is 42, 43 now. And Ugas is a legitimate top 5 fighter at welterweight, so nothing to hang his head about. But Manny Pacquiao has done so much in his career. He's beaten so many good fighters, you know, and really derailed fighters who were trying to, you know, mount something. And he was just so good. And, you know, just his effectiveness, his aggressiveness, and his humbleness is what made Manny so loved and respected, not just by his home country, but by pure boxing fans. Pacquiao's a really humble guy. A lot of people don't like that he makes excuses, though, after he loses fights. The shoulder excuse after the Mayweather fight. His legs cramping up. Even though those are valid, you know, to him, he and everything, that's something, in my opinion, and maybe all fighters should take this. Don't make your excuses until after the fight. Go in there and say, hey, he was a better man tonight. I'm going to go take a look at why and come back. But tell everybody later on, hey, I got surgery on my shoulder. You know, I wasn't at 100% because of this or because of that. But don't make excuses after the fight, you know, because we all get in the ring, and as long as we're healthy enough to get in the ring, everybody's injured. You know, I mean, all the fighters. I don't say we all, but all fighters get in the ring if they're healthy enough for one reason or the other. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's because you can't get that fight again, and you're afraid of not being able to get that fight. You know, there's reasons for why fighters get in the ring, and I'm sure every fighter has one injury or another, you know, that's hampering him. So, but Manny Pacquiao, like I said, an all-time great. You cannot dispute that. And he deserves to be on that Mount Rushmore upper echelon. And there's reasons why. But is he the greatest fighter of all time? No, he is not. That distinction goes to Muhammad Ali. But in the third video, I'm going to answer the question of whether he's greater than Floyd Mayweather. Who's the greatest between those two? So, we'll see. But that's it. That's the video on answering the question, is Manny Pacquiao the greatest of all time? I hope you guys enjoyed it. True Boxing, you've been here with the truth.